Welcome to Mpowered Living. I'm Sheu. On this podcast, innovative leaders and visionary experts share insights and practical tools for work, family, and marriage. Each episode, we'll explore how to elevate your life while staying grounded in what truly matters to you. You're working hard to navigate relationships, build a thriving family, and create a legacy of purpose. We're here to help you do that with confidence and intentionality. So if you're ready to live a life by design, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Mpowered Living. I'm your host, Sheu, and my guest today is Sean Magennis. Sean is a global leader who has spent decades helping organizations grow through change, challenge, and transformation, always with a deep focus on people, purpose, and connection. In this episode, we talk about what it takes to be a great leader, especially in moments of uncertainty, pressure, and growth. And we explore the importance of collaborating with others rather than trying to do it all alone. And Sean shares a powerful reframe around love, not as something abstract, but as a practical grounding force in how we navigate challenges and relationships. This is a thoughtful and perspective-shifting conversation about what it really means to grow as a leader and as a person. Let's dive in. All right, Sean, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. And I'm thrilled to be here with you.
All right, I have so much I want to talk to you about, but let's just get started. So you have worked with some incredible organizations and been really close with a lot of high-performing leaders. I am curious, in your time in those organizations, what have you noticed as some of the most common traits of high-performing, successful, thriving leaders?
Such a great question. And I think, I think at the deepest is individuals that approach their leadership with vulnerability, I think is one. It doesn't mean that they show weakness. It's just that they themselves. So for me, it always comes down to, both for myself and my observation of others, is that deep self-awareness, both of your intrinsic strengths, but also, of the weaknesses that one brings to the table. And then I'd say probably the umbrella for all of it is this deep sense of curiosity and lifelong learning. Because I think those, if a leader has those, they can overcome so much. So that's a characteristic that I've seen play out over like 35 years.
I love that. Okay, so let's dive into the first one, vulnerability.
Yeah.
What would you say to the listener that is hearing that word and they think it is soft or woo-woo or something that is for, the family life, but you don't show that at work? What
Yeah.
is your message to them?
So firstly, I'd say it's not a soft concept. It takes a lot of courage, bravery, and strength to truly sort of bring your authentic self, your whole self, to the work environment or to your leadership role. And I think, certainly from experience, what that says to me is you're going to take the time to develop sound judgment. There's consistency. And we all know that faking it is not credible. We can all project, we can all wear a mask, but we get found out pretty quickly. And so, to those listeners out there that think the mantra sort of fake it till you make it
Yeah.
really works, I'm here to tell you that it may in the short term, uh, but if you're in relationship with people, if you're spending time with your team, time with your customers, time with your stakeholders, your bank, etc., people will see who you are pretty quickly. So the sooner you're your authentic self, I think the better. Certainly in my life, that's played out.
How do you advise somebody to find this healthy balance between vulnerability and still feeling like, maybe you're new to a role and you feel like you need to prove yourself? And
Yeah.
so there's an aspect of like showing up and there's got to be a little bit of confidence. How do you balance those two kind of almost competing interests?
Yeah, listen, I'm in a new role. So I've been in my current role. I was invited to join the turnaround team at Scouting America, which is part of, the Boy Scouts of America. And so it's I've been a three-time entrepreneur, and all of my roles have been lengthy roles. So this is a new role with an existing team, with a massive challenge. And I will tell you that from the get-go, I just, decided I'm going to be myself. Now, the trade-off there is you need to have a confidence in your own truth.
Mm.
And it takes a certain amount of um, experience, and it takes a certain amount of courage to suspend any kind of judgment that may come back at you. So, what I mean by that is, I've long ago stopped worrying about what people think about me. And because I have a job to do, and I'm going to do it in an ethical way. I'm going to do it in a consistent way. I don't have all the answers in my current role. What I bring to the table is my lived life experience, my 35 years in business, leading large organizations, small organizations, failing, succeeding, communicating effectively. And so when I sit down in a new environment like I'm in right now, I want to bring all that to the table, not in a judgmental or a sort of self evaluation way that says, hey, there should be some fear associated with it. No, because again, I'm not in control of how somebody else treats me. I can only control how I show up. And that's where I think my own sort of formula, if you will, I call it my own personal trust formula, is built around sort of some pillars of self knowledge, um, of my own credibility, the way I show up. And by the way, I'm not perfect. None of us is perfect. Life is messy. Business is messy. We all know that. Um, but showing up with the sense of, I try and show up as calmly as I can. Do I get triggered? Yes. And I've seen some of your podcasts and your relationship with your spouse. We all get triggered, right? Um, but it's, for me, it's about how can I reliably be myself. Now, I'm going to have to adapt. I'm going to have to pivot in certain circumstances. And if I can leave my ego at the door, and all of us have an ego, but egos, particularly outsized egos, I have found get in the way of connecting. And the only way I know how to be successful in business and in life is through genuine connection of relationships. Doesn't mean we have to be best friends with our coworkers or with our stakeholders, but unless we're in genuine relationship where we understand each other, then I don't think you can be successful. That's a long-winded way of answering that question.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit more about that personal trust formula that you talked about?
Yeah, so this I've developed over many years, um, primarily out of my experience in my EO forum and my YPO forum, the Entrepreneurs Organization and the Young Presidents Organization, where the cornerstone of participating in one of the activities of both those organizations is something called forum, where you're in a group of 8 to 10 people, and nothing gets discussed outside of the group. It's highly confidential. So you're able to bring your complete self to it. So after 35 years of participating in forum, um, you know, what I've recognized is that how one shows up, I call it the trust formula. So it's your credibility, it's doing what you say you're going to do, finishing what you start. Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach has an interesting formula, right? Always be on time, etc. So that for me is part of, and doing what I say I'm going to do. It's showing up consistently in that regard. Do we all fall off the bus? Do I fall off the bus occasionally? Sure. That's just that's just humanity. The second one is reliability. And reliability is, I need to be counted on, and I need to count on others. So we need to be reliable for each other. If I say, that we're going to do something, we're going to achieve a certain financial goal, or we're going to achieve a certain initiative, and we're going to do it within a period of time, and it's going to take me showing up 5 days a week or 7 days a week in some instances, that is reliability.
Mm.
The third component is flexibility and adaptability. I call it adaptability, and that's being able to pivot. So we know that the pace of change in the world is so fast today. I'm diving into AI in a big way, and I'm training myself, and I'm going on courses, and I'm understanding how to create tools and thought partnerships with these various, new large language models that help me be a better leader and help me be more effective in what I do. I could not do that if I was stuck in one way of doing things. So that's where adaptability comes in. People call it pivoting, um, but also developing a mindset of acceptance that things are going to change. And I don't know what's coming around the corner. I can make some predictions based on, some leading indicators and activities, but none of us knows what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, let alone what's going to happen in the next 3 seconds, right? So being able to be adaptable. Then, as I've said, vulnerability. So that's the fourth element. And vulnerability is bringing your authentic self. Brand Steigen, a dear friend of mine, says, are you a knower or are you a learner? And I want to be a learner because when I interact or when I am exposed to people that are the loudest voice in the room, the smartest voice in the room, I work and am surrounded in many aspects of my life with some of the most intelligent, smartest people out there. The ones that I connect with the most, don't force that down your throat.
Mm,
That,
mm,
to me, that's kind of one of those, I want to associate myself with individuals that contribute, but that also willing to be contributed to. And I
yeah.
think when you're a learner and you can step back into that vulnerability of not knowing everything, I'm able, and I'll put this in the first person, I'm able to assess in a better way. And I think it also enables people to connect with me at a deeper level because we spend so much time, in the work environment that if it's not rewarding, I don't want to be in an environment where I'm unhappy. And I'm very clear on what makes me happy. And I think being really truly understanding deeply some of those things, and some of us, have dealt with some pretty tough things in life. I don't know a person that I've met and that I've gotten to know well, and I don't know a person that hasn't had some trial or tribulation in their life, some unimaginable tribulations, and some very blessed, maybe not so difficult, but we've all gone through struggles and challenges in our lives from the time we were able to, string a couple of words together and really start developing our intelligence and our ability to connect with people. And that's what I mean by vulnerability. And then minus, so if you think of a formula, so you've got trust equals credibility, reliability, adaptability, vulnerability, and minus ego. And that's very powerful. And if you go to, those of your members that want to go to my website, seanmagennis.com, I actually have the trust formula there because I'm trying to put that out. And by the way, huge credit to EO and YPO. The way I've structured it is kind of my own creation. But like most things in life, we're standing on the shoulders of some extraordinary people. And I want to honor where I've learned that.
Thank you for sharing that. What is a sign that somebody might need to work on this formula or one of the pieces of this formula? And how do they know which piece is their biggest opportunity for growth?
That is such a great question. And the only way, let's put it this way, there are some of us that don't have an evolved or developed emotional intelligence. And we're not good at picking up signals, despite the fact that we maybe not have as many, let's put it in the work context. My team is avoiding me. People cancel meetings on me. People avoid
Mm,
me in the hallways.
mm,
When I go to the cafeteria and I sit down, no one sits next to me. I would be asking myself, "Oh my gosh," and not being overly humorous, but there are specific signals that indicate, but there are some of us that are not equipped to pick that up. So my recommendation to a leader is on an anonymous basis, go out to a group of people or your friends or your family and ask them some very specific questions. How do I show up?
mm,
Do I show up as a knower? Do I show up as a learner? Do I show up with somebody that's interested in you, or am I just constantly pushing my own agenda, my own thoughts, my own opinions on you? And so the evolved leader is going to benefit from that by literally asking. Now, as a manager and a leader of people, when I observe, one of my team members who may have a gap in this area, there is a methodology and tool called 360, a 360-degree survey or assessment, which you can do on an anonymized basis. And what that gives you an opportunity, it's specific questions. It gives you an opportunity to get feedback in a very direct and candid fashion. And the more people you can do it, if you get 5, 10, 15, it starts to provide for you patterns. And, it's math, right? 50 people have said, you're not a great communicator. You don't listen. You're a know-it-all. And, you're the smartest person in the room. If I hear that 50 times, maybe it's true. And, as a young man, I was very fortunate in my mid to late 20s. I was very confident. I was really good at sales. I was able to convince people to my point of view, but I wasn't a great listener. And so, you know, I had a friend of mine, recommend I go on a course and he came with me actually. In fact, I think he paid for it. It was like $700. He was that committed to me improving myself that he actually paid for me. And it was eye-opening, because for me, my biggest lessons come from observing other people. And, really, because we start to see ourselves and we start to see patterns of behavior in others. I've been thinking about this recently. When I get irritated with somebody, is it really the person I'm being irritated with, or is it me seeing myself or my behavior in
Mhm,
their behavior? And
mhm.
that triggers me because I know deeply, deep down, that that's a behavior that is not a productive behavior.
Yeah.
Why are
So
you
true.
laughing? Is this
No,
like striking a chord?
I know, I know. I mean, like, when I think about the things that I get triggered by with my kids, it's because I see that in myself, It's like my complaints are rooted in things that I care about, but also just my own insecurities about what I think I should be doing and how I think I should be showing up.
Yeah, it's so, it's so profound, right? We spend, particularly in a business standpoint, we spend so much time chasing goals, chasing results, KPIs, rocks, daily tasks. And, it's no wonder that there's the health issues and there's burnout because, if we can focus on sort of what are your most important beliefs, and I think values, your core values and understanding your core values is such an important ingredient. Unfortunately, I was able to participate in a number of group meetings, and I credit YO and YO back in the day. Because I never went on those types of programs, but as soon as I became an entrepreneur and I just didn't know what I didn't know and I knew it, and I was exposed to the benefits of being with other entrepreneurs and utilizing them as a mirror and them seeing me and going through the struggles of building a business, failing at a business, seeing other people, pull themselves up by the bootstraps and re-succeed and recommit. It all sort of, for me, boiled down to what are those principles that I want to live my life according to? And by the way, it helped me attract my spouse. It helps me attract the friends that I choose and want to
Mm.
have in my life because life is short. As you and I both know, we have dear friends in common that are no longer with us, and they had so much more to give in life, but they gave so much for the period of time that they were here. And I want to be in that boat as well. And I don't want to fight a rearguard action with my own. We all have insecurities. I have insecurities, but I don't want to constantly battle insecurities. I'd rather be living as full as I possibly can with people with the same mindset. Not always possible, but for the bulk of the time, that's my sort of goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, earlier you mentioned that you are very clear about what makes you happy. And
Yes.
I know so many thriving, professional, successful on the outside leaders that don't really know what makes them happy. And so I'm curious what it took for you to have that kind of clarity. Did you do an exercise? Was it a book?
Yeah,
Was it a therapist? Was it your forum? Like, what were some of
yeah,
the tools? How did you get that kind of clarity? And I would even argue a lot of people don't even know that they don't have that clarity.
I know. So for me, I grew up in South Africa. I immigrated as a 26-year-old. Growing up in apartheid South Africa was very traumatic. One doesn't realize circumstances that we're all born into have a direct impact on our lives and on how we look at things and how we view things and lenses. And I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to live in Canada for 9 years, and I've been here in the US for 27 years. But I struggled in my mid-20s. By the way, I should have done therapy because therapy is an outstanding methodology, and there's some highly trained and highly skilled people just talking things through. But I grew up in, macho environment. I was a big sports guy. I was in the military for 4 years. Had, to the outside world, had my what together. But really, I was struggling with a lot of things, and I was introduced by this friend of mine that was married to my cousin to the Landmark Forum, which is an amazing program. People can say what they want about it, but it's an ontological methodology. And the framework behind Landmark is understand yourself, understand your past, recognize that your past doesn't control your future, recognize that we as individuals are completely 100% at cause in our lives, and every choice we make is our choice. Choice to be happy, choice to be sad, choice to be successful, choice to come on the show with you. That is not anything other than me being completely at cause in my life. And at 27 years old, I wish I'd had that at 15 years old or 14 years old, although, probably mentally wouldn't have the capacity to really deal with that as effectively as I did at 27. But that was an eye opener, a complete and utter eye opener. And my first, it was called the Landmark Forum, it was 3.5 days. And you went from 8 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. You were exhausted. And there was like 200 people in this group. And then I took on what was called the Curriculum for Living, which was a 1-year program. And it was so profoundly beneficial to me. It helped me in my business, helped me in relationships with my family, with my friends. It also helped me um, lower my guard and enable me to be more giving and more accepting in my personal relationships. And, that was, I can only say it was extraordinary. And I think that actually um, progressed me into meeting my wife, who her and I have been married for 27 years. And in fact, when we started dating, I asked her and invited her to take the Landmark Forum so that we had a similar language to communicate about things that were maybe stopping us in life. Now, has it been perfect? No. Has it been great? Yes. And have we evolved together? 100%. I didn't have a way of discussing that or even describing what was going on in my innermost self. And so very, very fortunate, Anne, to have that. And then I've touched over the course of years, a dear friend of mine introduced me to a silent retreat on an annual basis where just go for 3 days and don't talk to anybody. It happens to be a Jesuit retreat for those of you that are aware of some of these programs. But think little things like that I do consistently on an annual basis, which ground me in, you know, in my own sort of evolution of self and my own evolution of beliefs.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your marriage? Because one of the things that we often see is, when there are high performers in the relationship, it often causes a tension because there's this tension between like this desire to achieve professionally, but then also, what the family needs. And so, how have you guys navigated that tension so that it is
Yes.
um, uh, helped your family and your marriage and not driven a wedge between the two of you guys?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to understanding each other. Well, firstly, it comes down to, what do you have in common as the sort of the anchors, those pivotal anchors that despite anything that comes your way, you can come back to. And so for me, it was finding somebody that valued family, that valued sticking through things, through thick or thin. Those things for me were vitally important. And I would say that for me, it was combination of love and security. If I didn't feel sort of that unconditional love, and if I didn't feel secure, both secure in my love for my spouse and also the reciprocal side, um, I don't know whether I would have been cut out for, a monogamous relationship. But I knew at a very young age that, that was important to me. And I think the reason I learned it is the hardest thing I ever had to deal with ever in my entire life was when my parents divorced at 7 years old and I got sent to boarding school. You know, I saw two people that genuinely loved each other, unable to commit to each other through difficult times. And I just didn't want to put myself or anybody else through that. So maybe coming out of that experience was part of my realization that, I want to have, I, I, I believe firmly in responsibility. So, for example, one of my core values is responsibility. I want to attract somebody that's equally responsible. If I've made a commitment that I've said, you know, I am committed to you and you're committed to me, that means I'm responsible for that. And if I'm out of responsibility or out of integrity with that commitment, then why be in a relationship? Because responsibility is hard. This is not easy stuff. And I think the reason we have such a high divorce rate is because people don't start out saying, what does it look like? What is responsibility? What does it take? And, it's not that we talk about after 27 years, we don't even talk about that much anymore because we show up and we've proven it for 27 years to each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think part of it is, there was an exercise I went through several years ago, which helped me sort of also recommit is, and let's talk about responsibility. I have responsibility as a spouse. I have responsibility as a dad, a friend, a
Mhm.
coworker, to my faith in my instance. And so does that mean that I am sort of a poster child and perfect in those areas? No, but it says that I'm going to work on those because they're important to me.
So in your work, you've seen a lot of high performers, high performing leaders up close. Why is it that so
Yes.
many successful people still feel unfulfilled or burnt out?
Another great question. Yeah, I think society and the world projects on us all a, a, a mythical view of what success should be. And, I've seen it so much, right? I mean, it's, you look at our business leaders today, and those that get a lot of publicity and that are constantly in social media, um, there's a huge population of people that go, I want that, I want that, I want that yacht. I want my name in lights. I want that, house in Palm Beach and the glitz and the glamour. And so there's a percentage of individuals who are motivated by that. And I think a lot of successful people or people on that journey suddenly come to the point where you get on this treadmill. Um, and it's only when you get off the treadmill or you've had to deal with adversity, or you suddenly realize that you're alone and you've gone through 3 marriages, your kids won't talk to you, and you're sick, and you go, what is it all about? what have I spent the last 30 years of my life doing? For some people, success is I just spent 2.5 years, 3 years, you know, building out globally a group of ultra high net worth individuals for a very interesting peer organization and sort of cream of the crop of ultra high net worth individuals. And a lot of conversations that these individuals are having is not to get more money. It's how do I get some relevance in my life? How do I think about significance? And how do I think about the impact that I'm going to continue to have, not with money or with influence or with title, but what can I do with my resources and my experiences to make the world a better place, or, education better, or, solve for this tremendous poverty and inequality in life. I mean, those are the conversations that a lot of successful people in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been associating with are starting to not only starting to think about, but are acting on. And so it's not a one size fits all. But I worry. I worry about what we are telling young people to think about relative to success, as opposed to helping those young people really find their passion, what they love, what sort of meaning they want to have for themselves, and then, you know, what role do they want to play in society? Because we're manipulated today every single day of the week, minute by minute, second by second. And a lot of the manipulation that we're exposed to is in order to either make somebody a lot of money or, you know, implant a particular point of view because, they want you to follow a special interest that they may have. And I don't mean to be cynical about that, but I think being a critical thinker is a skill that we need to teach our children.
Okay, so you talked about this group that you worked with the high ultra high net worth, and that they are really focused on impact and purpose. What is your advice? What would you suggest to the listener who may not put themselves in the ultra high net worth category?
Yeah.
How can they, you know, play this outsized role so they can have massive impact?
Yeah. The Well, let me again put it in the first person, because I think it's such an individual journey, and it goes back to, for me, the foundation is literally constantly sort of peeling back that onion. What drives you, what motivates you, because for me, it's less about what other people think. It's what do you stand for? In order for me to have an impact, I need to know what I stand for. So my 35-year career, I spent a lot of time with young people. I watched my daughter, grow up. I only have, the one child, but her friends, etc. And I'm most concerned about young people. Now, was I concerned about young people 30 years ago? No. I was trying to make it in the world. I had a business. I was trying to build the tools and create the freedom that finances bring to you. So once I got to financial freedom and I was able to do things, I was able to understand that I had choices that didn't pigeonhole me. I was able to then start focusing on, what do I stand for? What is the purpose? So why am I involved in a youth service organization like Scouting? And why did I attract that? And how did I get brought in? Is because I put out there, I was able to have an impact in EO. So when I joined EO, we had less than 1,000 members. My year as global chair, we hit 5,000. A lot of people helped. We were funded by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. We wouldn't have got anywhere near that. Now they stand at 24.
Yeah.
When I was invited to join the YPO team, I've been a member for 19 years, but when I was invited to be an executive on the management team, we had 13,000 members. When I left at the end of 2020, we had 33,000 members. So think about that. Now, was that all my impact? No, but did I play a part in that? 100% I did. And I showed up every day, standing for bringing more people into community with each other who were about growing and learning and becoming better leaders and sharing ideas and literally growing together. So that's my DNA. So I'm very clear on my DNA. I also know what my strengths are. So if the audience is really looking at how do I have an impact, creating a sort of a list of what are your values, what do you stand for, what are you good at, what would people say you're good at? When you show up in flow, if you would, what does that look like? If I could spend 90% of my time focused on areas that I'm good at, do you think I'd be more successful and more fulfilled and happier? Absolutely. Now, 10% is a trade-off. Well, maybe now, other people can do that, right? So surrounding yourself with people that have a passionate desire and who really enjoy, and that goes back to personality. And some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. I'm kind of directly down the middle. And then where do I need support? So what gaps do I have? So as a leader on my impact journey, I've realized that I'm better being part of a team and part of a movement than I am trying to do it all on my own or in a small team environment. So I'd rather have an impact in the millions than in the thousands or the hundreds. So I've done over the last 20 plus years, I'm playing in an environment where I want to have an outsized impact from the small contribution that I'm making with a group of other people that share similar values, share a passion for a purpose. And that's why I've gotten involved in EO and YPO and now scouting, because these are peer communities where the work is so good and so powerfully impactful that it can be a force multiplier. And then bringing other people into that is part of my journey. And then energy, you know, what fuels you and what drains you. I don't like negativity. And I don't like people talking smack or badly about anybody else, because then I have to deal with your baggage. Don't give me your baggage. If you and I have a relationship and it's a good relationship and you and I are tracking and we don't have any issues, but somebody then comes to me and says, well, Sean is a loser and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm suddenly listening to somebody else's opinion of you or me, that's destructive in my view. And so I'm very clear now, and it's hard because people have a way of not accepting. No, I don't want to be judgmental, but there are some people who just can't stop themselves bad mouthing somebody else. Well, I don't want to deal with that. Now, if I have a negative relationship with you, then that's my issue to deal with. And if I don't deal with it, then that's doubly my issue, right?
Yep.
So it's what fuels you, what drains you. I don't want to be in an environment where 90% of the time I'm drained. Now, does that mean that I don't want to be in an environment with challenges? No. I'm currently in an environment where, a 116-year-old organization that changes children's lives has just gone through bankruptcy. So the reality of my situation is I'm working within a business that's coming out of bankruptcy. Is that easy? No. But is it a worthwhile challenge to fix that and to, you know, commit to creating an environment where millions of kids, can learn character and, understand the value of teamwork and collaboration and great ethics and values? Absolutely. So for me, the challenge is just a sideline, which we'll solve for. Those things can be solved for through tactics and a bunch of really simple, strategic, with sound tactics. It may take time, but that can be solved for. What cannot be sacrificed is the opportunity to create a safe environment for kids to flourish, learn, and grow with each other. So imagine if we're all just spending, in my case, if my team and our volunteers are spending all their time there with a small group of people dealing with the stuff in the background, what can be accomplished? 60 million scouts in the world today, Anne. 60 million. And I imagine what that
Wow.
can do to the world. So again, I'm not selling scouting. I'm just sharing with you my personal sort of mantra around, leadership beginning with self-awareness.
My kids are scouts, by the way.
Yes. That is fair. Are you
Okay.
are you in Circle 10 or are you in Longhorn?
I believe it's Circle 10, Pack
Awesome.
425. All right.
Okay. Tell me how many there are, and I'll have a couple of little things coming your way.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. Okay, so I would love to do a
Well,
couple rapid fire questions if you're up for it.
absolutely.
Okay, one habit that improves your leadership.
One habit that improves fitness, health.
Mm. Anything in particular?
Strength training twice a week with my wife with a personal trainer. Uh, Eating really healthy and, trying to walk at least 2 miles, maybe 3 miles every day, weather dependent.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not healthy and if we're not healthy as a couple, I think that creates all kinds of stuff. And leadership is based on you showing up healthy.
What's one mindset people need to let go of?
Criticizing others.
A book that has shaped your life.
Wow. So many, so many, so many. I loved James Clavell Shogun when I was a early teenager. One, I fell in love with it because it was about Japan and Japanese tradition, and it's a whodunit yarn, successful people, and the whole Japanese shogunate. It was very brilliant. So I would say that's the fiction book that's been most impactful. On the nonfiction side, one that I constantly come back to because I love his thinking around the flywheel is Jim Collins' Good to Great. I really like that.
And then last rapid fire question. What's a question that you ask yourself when you're facing a challenge?
Can I accept the things that I cannot change?
Good. Okay, if somebody is listening and they want to improve their leadership, what is one small shift that you would recommend that they make today to have greater impact?
I would go off-site, go away for a day. I would do a full deep dive assessment of um, what's most important to me, what have I learned, what do I need to still learn, when am I my best, what frustrates me, and then what support do I need. I would literally just take some time to do an inventory. We so seldom, and this is not sort of sitting down and doing your goal setting, which I love to do, by the way, end of every year. But this is taking an inventory of yourself. Build a set of questions, have ChatGPT help you, and literally sit down and answer them authentically, in service of what is it that I want to do in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years. A great exercise in Stephen Covey's early work that he got you to do was, write your obituary. And, if somebody was doing a eulogy for you, what would that look like? I love exercises like that, but I think they need to remain fresh. And so I think go away. And if you're in a relationship and you can do it with your spouse, I think it's a great thing to do together. Um, but start with yourself, because if you don't have your act together yourself, then you can't have your act together for somebody else.
All right, Sean, can you tell us a little bit about your website and if people are interested in learning more about you, they want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yes. So my website's really easy. It's SeanMagennis.com. Um, I am fully employed, but I do take time on the weekends. I love doing pro bono, even some paid consulting. Like 2 weekends ago, two entrepreneurs invited me to New York City to talk about. They're building, by the way, a phenomenal peer group. I think it's going to be sort of the best of all the current peer groups out there. I don't want to jinx them, but they're two fantastic entrepreneurs. And we just spent 2 days and they picked my brain and I shared just, completely openly about my experience in peer groups over the last 35 years. And I got, I think, more than they did out of it because I just saw the enthusiasm and stuff. So that's my website. If you're willing to, if you engage with me, my one condition is particularly young entrepreneurs that want mentoring. If you want to, spend some time, I can't guarantee you that I'll say yes, but if you show up, and you do the work. Because I often do this with young, business people, or even business people that are new entrepreneurs, is there's homework to do, because this takes work. You know it. You and Sunny are great examples of this. Your 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 parents, your business people, you're running hard, you're volunteering. We do all that. But you've got to be able to show up and do the work, not just listen passively. Um, but I'm not looking for more stuff to do, Ed. But if you want to help, and you've got children between the ages of 5 and 17, like you do, get them in scouting, get them outdoors, get them off their devices and in communication with each other, because that'll save the world, in my view. That's my shameless plug.
Sean, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap up?
And thank you for having me. And if I could leave one last series of thoughts for your listeners, is just remember that life is a never-ending learning experience. Love, for me, is the most powerful antidote to any problem. And then, coupled with service to others, your own freedom of choice. And then most importantly, as a leader, collaborating with people is the most critical relationship exercise enterprise that you can embark on. And so good luck with your journeys, and I'm rooting for you. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thanks for tuning in to Empowered Living. I hope today's conversation sparked some inspiration and gave you tools to live more intentionally in your family, work, and life. If you enjoyed our episode today, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story or actionable takeaway. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them, because living an intentional life is better when we do it together. Until next time, remember, the life you want doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. Let's keep creating it one step at a time.